Welcome to the Power Curve. I'm Holly Scott. In our podcast, I have the pleasure of chatting with accomplished industry executives regarding their career trajectory, pinnacle decisions they made along the way, and how that's impacted them, and the hopes of aspiring each of you, our listeners, to navigate your own career. Today, I am pleased to have with me my friend and colleague in the industry, Bud Reeves. He is the CEO of IPM Tirana Healthcare. Bud has an extensive background in respiratory therapies through both clinical foundation as well as leadership in global companies like Philips and Nellcor, Puritan Bennett. Welcome, Bud. Great to have you.
Thank you, Holly. Good day, everyone.
How's everything in North Carolina today?
Actually, it's amazing. The weather's a little hot and humid, but otherwise in North Carolina, what else do you have, right? So, yes, it's great, and it's a beautiful, beautiful sort of very late spring, early summer day, and it's always a good day in North Carolina.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. I ran through rain to get over to the studio to make sure I wasn't completely soaked by the time I got to this video presentation, else we would have had pure audio only. But no, thanks for joining us today. But I know we met before you joined IPM Tirana, and you had been in extensive career, and I'd love to hear a little more about, perhaps you could share with the audience what drew you to Tirana, and especially based on your career to date, what drew you in, and what are you excited about over there?
Oh, well, it's Holly. First of all, thank you. We certainly have had a number of different encounters and transactions over the last couple of years, so it's always been a pleasure. So thank you for that. Actually, really, the opportunity to build a ventilator company is really the thing that brought me here to IPM Kirana. That's sort of been my experience throughout my years. I certainly started off as a respiratory therapist. Most of the audience should probably have heard of respiratory therapists with the recent pandemic. So respiratory therapists are medical professionals that specialize in care of patients with respiratory disease. And specifically for me, I've always been involved in the ventilator business. I spent about 8 years in the respiratory therapy arena in the hospital, and ended up leaving the hospital and for the last many years being involved in the medical device business, and being able to be a part of a new ventilator company to help supply ventilators to those countries or those agencies that need product due to the pandemic, and to be able to help our patients is really what pulled me over to IPM Kirana to be able to be a part of that.
Mm-hmm. No, it was certainly an interesting company and a very interesting time for you and I to become introduced to. And what I liked about the organization and the opportunity is, yes, the pandemic certainly accelerated opportunity for the organization overall. But what you looked at as a real subject matter expert was the quality of the technology and the quality of the impact. You were no stranger to H1N1 and SARS and lots of other things that have been going on impacting respiratory care for decades prior to this pandemic that we've experienced. So what did you find that was interesting about the tech that you thought might benefit patients as you started exploring?
Right. Well, I mean, the technology is certainly something that was very interesting to me. I mean, there are many types of ventilators on the market. There are many ways to ventilate patients, invasively, non-invasively, and with other types of technology. But this technology seemed to really have some components in it that we hoped would be able to help patients that were having these COVID kind of lungs, where you have different areas of the lungs that were, some were diseased, some were normal, some were partially diseased, and so on. So being able to really to use some of this technology to hopefully help these patients and help them over their crisis and be able to go back home to their families.
Hmm.
It was really something that when I looked at everything, it just made a lot of sense.
Hmm.
And of course, we're currently right now we're selling to the rest of the world, where we hope to have apply to FDA for our 510(k) sometime this year. So we're working really, really hard to prepare a good submission, and to be able to get this technology, which we feel like is certainly a technology that has a place in the market,
Hmm.
and look forward to hopefully getting it out to the U.S. here in the next year.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. The more prevalence of discussion around ventilators, you really realize where there's some serious advantage to ones that have some of the nuances and some of the intelligence that the Corona device does. That I've dug into a little bit, and that could really provide some overall clinical outcomes that would be much better than so
Hmm.
much is out there. So that's great. Well, I appreciate you spending time with us today because we like to chat a bit about career and your career development because
Hmm.
you've had an extensive career starting from the clinical side and now CEO of this promising young organization. So I'd love to hear, and so would our audience, on how you got here and what glimmers of nuggets of wisdom you can share with us. So maybe we could start early. What? Tell me more about your household. You went into respiratory therapy. What were there clinicians in your household? Was healthcare in the blood?
Yeah, well, I mean, I heard you say something about decades, so I think you're trying to talk about my age. So let's leave
My
the decade
decades. My
let's
decades.
leave the decade part out of this. No, just kidding, just kidding. Actually, interestingly enough, as a child, I suffered from asthma, and of course, still as us respiratory therapists know, you never really are cured of asthma. It's always a condition that you live with and you manage. And even in my early days of playing football as a child, or basketball, or anything outside, and I always had something that I was trying to feel really wasn't exactly right, and in my breathing, and so I was finally diagnosed with asthma, and so that was one of the things that I sort of dealt with and managed throughout my early years, my teenage years, and when it became time to choose a career, one of the things that was a possibility for me was going into an allied health field, and particularly respiratory therapy was one that interested me a lot, just because of my asthma. And so it was, and I'm really, really super glad I did it. I mean, you have a lot of choices, right? When you graduate from high school, and this happened to be one that sort of fit me very, very well. And so that was a part of some of the original thought process that I went through in order to sort of figure out, what did I want to do with my life, and always was part of in my character to be able to really sort of help people. And I think that's one of the reasons that I chose that field to begin with.
Hmm. Very interesting. As many times as we've discussed it, I didn't know that you had the childhood asthma. I did too,
Hmm.
actually.
Hmm.
My mom
Yes.
tells me stories about taking me in the ER in the middle of the night and getting a steroid shot, which is what they did back then, right? I
Hmm.
don't know if that's still the standard case, but she said it was terrifying as a parent,
Hmm.
to have those episodes. So there's nothing like a personal passion to drive you in a career. Many of the best and most accomplished executives I've seen start from that foundation. So I
Hmm.
can appreciate that getting behind the science and really understanding the mechanics of it. That must have been a fulfilling start.
Right. Well, it's a huge advantage.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the camaraderie, between the people that worked in the hospital. I mean, the nurses, the physicians, the other technicians, and that whole goal of having the patient in the center and being able to address the patient need was really a terrific and fulfilling kind of situation. And certainly when I decided to make the leap out of the hospital, having those kinds of experiences, and particularly knowing what I knew about respiratory disease and how ventilators worked and oxygen therapy and aerosol therapy and anything else that you touch as a respiratory therapist was a huge advantage, particularly in business. Being starting off in sales and going to sales management and going to marketing and so on. It was a huge advantage, and so glad I did it. And so it's a it was certainly a terrific way to start my career.
Hmm. Was that was that something that perhaps a mentor suggested to you, or what brought you into the business side?
Well, I mean, it was really sort of a funny story. I mean, it was, I'm not going to mention any names, but I happened to be in my office one day, and one of the salespeople that called on me regularly was sitting down, and we were talking, and I mentioned that we were, our hospital was going to look at a pulmonary function machine. And he said, "Oh, well, it just so happens my distributorship has a pulmonary function machine." He says, "Would you mind looking at it?" And I said, "No, not at all. I mean, I'm open to looking at pretty much anything."
Hmm.
And so one day, all of these boxes sort of showed up in my office in my pulmonary function lab, and they sat there, and they sat there, and they sat there, and finally, I called up my sales rep, and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" I said, "All these boxes in my lab, we're tripping over them." He says, "Well, the person that's supposed to come down and set it up, his wife had a baby just now, and he wasn't able to get there, and so on." I said, "Well, oh, yeah, that's terrific. Congratulations to him." I said, "But that doesn't change that I've got these boxes sitting in my pulmonary lab." And I said, "Well, do you mind if I set it up?" And the gentleman said, "Well, I don't think you have any experience in setting up this equipment." I said, "Well, I'm happy to do it." I said, I'm sort of a technically savvy guy, so I think I can set it up." He said, "Well, sure, go ahead and try." So anyway, so I'm in there, I love a challenge, right? So I'm in there zipping open my boxes and taking all this stuff out and looking at the instructions. And I don't know, in about 2 hours, we had it put together and doing tests, right? So I called him up and I said, "Hey, this thing works pretty well. So whenever this gentleman is able to come travel again, we'd like a full in service." And he says, "What do you mean? You put this thing together?" I said, "Yeah." So anyway, so a couple of days later, the distributor guy who I was talking to, he comes in and says, "Hey, and I just can't believe you did this." And I said, "Okay, well, I mean, this is what we do in respiratory, right? We're sort of technical people. We figure out how to get from point A to point B as best as we can." And he says, "Well, it just so happens that I'm going to be hiring for a capital equipment specialist in my company." He says, "Wow, you seem to have a lot of knowledge. Would you like to do that?" And I said, "Well, just like anybody else, I said, well, how much does it pay?" Right. So that's our
Right,
first question.
right.
And so anyway, so long story short, I ended up going to work for him. And that was my first foray into the other side of the desk, so to speak, as a salesperson.
That is too funny. So you didn't realize that was a hands-on interview.
Had no idea. Had only thing I was trying to do was solve a problem, trying to get the boxes out of my lab so my patients could get in and out, and we could run our blood gases, and we can run our PFTs, and without having to, go ahead and trip over boxes. So
Yeah.
no, it was interesting. I mean, like I said, I love a challenge. So just give me a piece of equipment, and I'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you did well, and that was a great move for you. That's great. Now, you mentioned something when you were in the clinical setting, and especially given your personal foundation in this area, you mentioned, keeping the patient at the center of your decisions and your thought processes and so forth. Did you find that more challenging getting into the business side? And if so, were there any measures or steps or reminders or ways that you kept yourself centered in that aspect and process focused as it comes to clinical outcomes?
I mean, I think somewhat. I mean, I think you unconsciously always do it, and particularly whether or not it's making sure that your customers are satisfied. And when I mean your customers, I mean whoever's buying from you,
Hmm.
and no matter what the product is. I mean that first job, I was selling blood gas analyzers, I was selling pulmonary function machines, and I was selling ventilators, and of course in a small territory, a couple of states. And and I was selling products that really no one had ever used before. So it was certainly, first of all, gaining confidence of my initial customers, but also being able to continue and fulfill what I had told them and what I had promised them, and making sure they bought from me again.
Hmm.
And but keeping, for example, I mean, from the blood gas side, I mean, it's always the machine. You always wanted to make sure the blood gas machine was up, and particularly if it was in the neonatal area.
Sure.
And so some of our products at the time were really focused on neonatal blood gas sampling. And so it was always that, making sure that this hospital had this equipment up and running for those patients. It was always, I mean, as much as I liked the techs, the people that ran it, I mean, it was really all about the patients.
Hmm.
And so that's, when you get up and somebody calls you and says, "Hey, my machine's down, I can't figure out what's going on." You try to get it up over the phone, but then you realize you have to, in 3 in the morning, you're going to have to drive 2.5 hours in order to make sure that these patients had this technology that's necessary in order to make sure that they're diagnosed appropriately. So it's always really a center,
Hmm.
and it's always, what, at least for me, it's always really what got me up in the morning, and what motivated me to be able to get up every day and make sure that all this equipment was working properly, so that our patients didn't suffer, right, because of something we did. So
Hmm. And I've heard other accomplished clinicians who've gone into industry, make a pretty bold overall statement that, look, when you're in a respiratory therapy area, you impact one patient. When you go into business, you impact hundreds, if not thousands, of patients.
exactly.
And now you were able to cross into neonatal and adult, and various aspects of medicine, because it all has an impact, right? It all does.
Yeah, it really does. And I mean, we today, I mean, really what I'm doing today is that, we're building a lot of product, and sending a lot of our product to Latin America, for example, because the pandemic is raging there.
Hmm.
And so it's, again, you're really impacting a nation,
Hmm.
in many ways, when you send product to particularly the small countries.
Hmm.
And this is not something that I think sometimes we think about, but some of the things that we're doing today just really impacts not only that individual patient, but a nation, and um, their thought process when it comes to how their patients are doing.
Yeah. No, you're
Yeah.
really you're still in the throes of it, as we're all feeling on the US side, some sense of recovery. You being a global company, it sounds like you're right. You're still in the midst of the fires, right? You're still in it's raging, and
Yes, we really
you're
are.
on.
And
Hmm.
I mean, there are many countries out there that are, quite a ways behind the U.S.,
Hmm.
and are seeing a lot of effect from the pandemic today. And it's gratifying to be able to help.
Hmm.
And that's really what we're doing. That's one of the reasons the company was founded and put together, was really because the pandemic was raging, and there are countries, there are individuals, there are um, areas of the world that really need these products.
Hmm.
And if they don't have them, if the and at one time, I think maybe a year and a half ago, it was very difficult to buy and get any kind of ventilator delivered,
Hmm.
just because of the demand.
Hmm.
And today it's not quite as high from a worldwide perspective, but still there are countries, there are places in the world that are in the same position that others were a year ago.
Hmm.
Yeah.
No, exactly. And there's always a quest for higher ground. So a ventilator is not a ventilator. If you have one that's truly superior, and you can get better outcomes and control the patient treatment regimen specific to
Mhm.
what they need, as you mentioned with the Corona device. I mean, that's a game changer.
Mhm.
So.
Absolutely. I mean,
Hmm.
we've learned so much
Hmm.
in the last year and a half about how to treat these patients, and we've learned a lot about high flow, and we learned a lot about ventilator modes, and
Hmm.
we learned a lot about ways that these patients can be treated, and the outcomes can be can be certainly augmented, and that's it's great to be able to learn those things, but I mean, obviously, it still boils down to that individual patient making sure they can walk out of the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
and regrettably, many didn't,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something we fight every day.
Mm-hmm. No, and we appreciate you fighting that fight for sure. When you think about your time in the clinical side, and you still are in the clinical side, even though you're in industry, you're certainly deep
Mhm.
in it. Were there lessons from the hospital that you find yourself pulling out of your toolbox sometimes in terms of thinking through challenges as now an executive or anywhere along your industry timeline?
Yeah, I mean, I think as I mentioned a little earlier, I think the whole teaming aspect of everything really that we do is, at least came from my early forming my early really leadership abilities and how to really get from point A to point B and get something done is really from a team perspective. I mean, if you think about some of the teaming that was brought to light just in the last year and a half, in large hospitals that in many places were overwhelmed by COVID patients, and how they worked so hard as a team, and they won as a team and they lost as a team, and they were all going down the same road, just turning different dials, if you as an example,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's giving medication or whether it's managing ventilators or whether it's writing physician's orders or whether it's doing procedures. I mean, you're all working as a team. Same thing with us in industry, and today, I mean, we have a meeting every week. We update our individual departments, but then we talk about teaming and how we're going to team to make things better, for the company as well, and as also evidence for our patients. How can we support our customers in a better way to make sure that they have what they need in terms of operating our technology, or how that our technology may be able to impact what they're doing every day. So I think that whole teaming aspect is really something that has always stuck with me. And also, of course, in my early years of playing sports, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's another piece of it too. And but for us, um, that's where we sit. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's our centric approach.
Well, there's so many aspects that have the consistent theme of learning through early education, through sports, through any environment that you're put together and you're pushing through very challenging circumstances, or sometimes you win, sometimes you don't win, but you always learn, that
Hmm.
those lessons can really come through. Um,
Exactly.
how about mentors? Did you have early mentors? Did you develop mentor relationships, or organically, or anyone that you knew that had moved from the clinical side to industry? I'm just curious on when you think about mentors, who impacted you along the way.
I think a handful, Holly. I mean, certainly, when I left respiratory therapy school and went into the hospital, I mean, we all had people that we looked up to, and as a good gracious, 20-year-old kid, coming out and starting my first career. I mean, there were always people in the hospital, whether it was a physician or whether it was a supervisor of respiratory, or those people that could teach you how to do things and you could help emulate. I mean, we all have had people that affected us.
Hmm.
Some people you look at and say, "Oh my gosh, I want to be just like that person," right? And some of the people you go on, I'm not really sure if I want to go down that road or not, right? I
Hmm.
mean, there's always those. I'm not going to say a negative mentor, but
Sure.
there's always ones that say, I'm just not sure I want to go down, that person's path, right? But there's so many positive ones that you have, and certainly I had my share in the hospital. And in addition to that, I mean, once I left the hospital, people that could help me accomplish what I had chosen now to do. Right, and you leave the hospital, it's almost, people look at you, particularly from the hospital, and going, "Oh man, you're going to the dark side." I mean, that's
Right.
not necessarily true, right? But you help people in different ways.
Hmm.
Um, but um, but I think we all have those people that mentor us and that you look up to. And then sometimes you form your own, your own opinions. Sometimes you form your own path because there's certain things that you do as a person that you say, oh my goodness, if I go that way, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that, and if I go that way, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. But this road that looks like the yellow brick road is the one I want to go down, right?
Hmm.
Which might be different than any other mentors that you have.
That's right. That's right. You can learn what you are drawn to as much as what you're pushed away from mentors, just the same, and they're both valuable, right? We're learning
Exactly. And,
learning
and
what's
many
right.
times it could be
Hmm.
customers,
That's
right?
very true.
That you
Hmm.
form relationships with. And I can think back in my early career, in sales and particularly in the ventilator business that unfortunately many of my customers have passed on, but some people that I was going, wow, I just, it was so terrific to be able to meet these people, to be able to form relationships, to be able to go to lunch. And of course, a lot of things that you can't necessarily do today, but being able to have those kinds of relationships with people and being able to be influenced by them,
Hmm.
and people that were just terrific and were along your value line, which is great.
Excellent. And so, at what point did you feel that a smaller company was in store for you? I know it was before I tapped you on the shoulder. You had already started giving some thought to considering a startup.
Mhm.
Moving from the big corporate environment to a young company has a sense of measured risk about it, right? And I'm
Sure.
curious what was on your mind when you started thinking about that, and how that transition was for you.
Sure. I mean, certainly with large companies, you usually have plenty of support to pretty much do whatever you need to have done, right? And I mean, there's always somebody that does that job. Um, but with big companies, there's always those checks and balances and barriers that are in place to sort of keep things in check somewhat. And so I think we're always looking for, at least I'm always looking for, the ability to affect change and the ability to use my experiences and what I've done in my career to help others and to help build a company. And many times in large companies, you can affect your own little individual world, but there's not a whole lot that you can do to affect things, outside of your little sphere of influence.
Hmm.
And with IPM Kirana, I mean, on a daily basis, we make changes because we can, right?
Hmm.
It's the right thing to do.
Hmm.
And so you have the ability to affect the change that would make your or change your market strategy, to be able to help drive the business and to an individual customer.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of decisions that we can make on the fly. And again, we're a startup. So again, you have some amount of measured risk.
Hmm.
And what you do is you look at it and say, what I'm about to do, how does that affect everyone in the company? How is
Hmm.
that going to affect my customer?
Hmm.
And if these are all positive things, then you go and you push forward and see what happens.
Hmm.
And so many times it's, oh yes, it's terrific, but then sometimes I say, man, probably shouldn't have done that.
Hmm.
But that's a learning experience. That's what you had talked about before.
Sure.
And no matter how seasoned we are,
Hmm.
right, we all can make mistakes. What we hope is that the longer that we have been in a career in situations, that we've learned enough from it that those mistakes are kept at a minimum. And
Hmm.
so that's sort of where I looked at the new company and said, wow, this is really an opportunity to build something. And that's part of also sort of what motivates me. I love building things,
Hmm.
and being able to build a company from scratch. I mean, gosh, that's a terrific opportunity.
Yeah. Build technology in your office, build a company, it's all the same, right?
I, what can I say? It's
All
just
comes back to how you're wired.
that's just sort of who I am, and I think many people are the same way.
Hmm.
And being able to help people along the way, I mean, our employees, the people that we hire. I mean, to me, that's a huge responsibility of a leader. And if you can't develop those people that you've come in contact with that are working in your company, then that's a to me that you failed somewhat in leadership. And so being able to help these people, help mentor them, and along in business and in their chosen field. I mean, whether it's regulatory or sales or marketing,
Mm-hmm.
or finance, or any of those disciplines, being able to help mentor those people and help them move forward. I mean, it's a huge responsibility for any leader. And so for me, that's something that we concentrate on, we focus on, really pretty much every day that I go to work. I mean, is there something I can say to that person to either make their job not necessarily easier, but more fulfilling? And what can I do to prepare them for the next step? And so those are the kind of things that I like to do when I'm in a leadership position, whether it was in a large company or at IPM Kirana. But right now, I have more of an opportunity to do that.
It sounds like a lot of your decisions and leadership style center around the best interest of the company, but equally the best interest of your team.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think you have to, because I mean, one of the things that I found in my career, if you do that with your team, and your team has confidence, in what you're doing and what you're telling them, that you're doing whatever you're doing is in the best interest, and they understand it, and you're transparent, and you're being able to sit down and say to them, hey, this is what we're going to do, and this is why, and this is what it's going to do for all of us, right? And this is what it's going to do for our customers and our patients. Then people, your employees tend to say, oh my gosh, I'm ready to follow you into battle,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
those are the kind of things that I think cause the employee to say, wow, I really want to work here, and I don't want to work for anywhere. I don't want to go anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
That other person might want to pay me 5% more, but I am so much happier here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they've come in and you've allowed them to share in the vision, where we're
Sure.
going and understand the why, right?
Right.
The big
Exactly.
the big why for all of us. And if they own it, if they own that why, they're more apt to get up in the morning and get as excited as you are. We see it on our
Absolutely.
team
Yeah,
too.
it's
Mm-hmm.
just a funny little story. We have a gentleman that works in the company. And his focus has always been regulatory. And when we hired him, it wasn't necessarily regulatory for ventilation.
Mm-hmm.
But what's funny about that is that now he knows just about as much about ventilation as some of the other people in the company that have done that for many years, because he was interested, and he said, "Wow, this is terrific. Not only terrific technology, but also it really helps people. I want to know everything I can possibly learn about it." And we have our VP of Medical Affairs. They're in there like usually an hour a day, sitting in front of the ventilator, and he's learning more and more and more. And so these are kind of things that people are really interested in,
Mm-hmm.
and they're interested in not only giving their career a boost, but also learning as much as they can about what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you provide that opportunity and you support all of that, well, people will be excited.
That's it, and it's hand in hand. It really does facilitate the other. If someone's
Hmm.
engaged and wants to learn and wants to become more of an expert, or more of a subject matter expert, or more generally knowledgeable about what they're working as, they become a
Hmm.
better employee, and it's cyclical. So
Really does.
yeah, no, that's great. So you've seen many times. We both ridden the industry. We joke around about a couple decades, but we I know I've been through a couple of recessions and now this pandemic and everything else. As a leader, though, I am curious, and you've been leading for many years, even before IPM. So, was there a point anywhere where you were thrown a real unexpected curveball? Where you really got surprised by something, and as a leader, you had to navigate through. And I'm curious about what happened and how you managed through, knowing that other people were impacted. That would be really beneficial for the
Hmm.
audience to hear as they think about or are in early stages of leadership.
Well, I mean, I think that everyone has gone through different things in their career that have been challenging. I think probably, my biggest one, and again, um, no identification, but there were times when I've had to lay people off
Hmm.
because of whether or not a product has failed, a product has been recalled, or something that basically just left you, without anything to sell and having a huge payroll
Mm.
that you had to meet. And so all of those things are extremely difficult. And I think that as you navigate through this type of situation, you always think about, really how it's going to affect the employee. You do everything you can to make sure that someone is supported, in situations like this. And it's as easy a transition as possible. I mean, no one ever wants to hear the fact that they no longer have a job. However, there are many cases, and those sometimes those are in that situation that have been recently told it and haven't really found a job yet. But there are many times that next opportunity is so much better than the one you left.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would always, to those that are out there looking, I would always think about those kinds of activities, and really what do I really love doing, and then find that particular area something that you really love doing. And the old adage, if you find something you love doing, you never work a day in your life. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's, if you can find a great fit, a lot of times when that previous job doesn't work out, hey, there's another fit there that's much better down the road.
That's so true. And I'm fortunate to see that, the other side of it, because I do
Yes.
counsel with so many individuals who are impacted by changes outside their control. And
Hmm.
in the moment, it's tough to understand and it's tough to get your head around, and
Yes, it
it's,
is.
it's emotional and logically
Right.
dismantling, right? So going through that is one aspect of it. But what I see on the other side is so often they end up in better places than they started for whatever
Absolutely.
reason.
Well, I mean, I think you and I have spoken about that. I mean, I've
Hmm.
gone through that myself, and which is, again, you don't like to hear those words, right? But then when you have the opportunity to say, well, gosh, there may be something better for me,
Hmm.
across the horizon, and that happened to me, and I was, wow. I was to say, my career is taking off. So it's
Hmm.
really sort of interesting, how when things like that happen, and that's been a few years ago, but still my career has gotten so much better, since I left that company.
Hmm. Well, I do want to point to one area here that I think is important for those who are aspiring to leadership. When I asked you, Bud, about one of your greatest challenges as a leader and how difficult some particular experience was, you came to light about something that was impacting other people, your team. You were going to have to let go of your teammate, or there's a recall. There were other people impacted. Um, as a leader, as you aspire into leadership, the best leaders put their team first. They
Hmm.
do,
Yes.
either innately or specifically. They do, and now you have, just like when we become parents, all of a sudden there's lives outside of us that depend on us. It really
Exactly.
does have that level of gravity and responsibility. Leading people isn't for everyone. And,
Mm-mm.
and, and leading people isn't the only way to define success. If you end up leading people and you are a good leader, you will often have more pain associated with the impact of your team and what actually
Hmm.
happens to your team members and the people that you have within your circle
Hmm.
than what happens to you specifically. I see that
Exactly.
time and
I
time
mean, it's
again.
absolutely. I mean, I have had a handful of friends that I felt that were tremendous leaders. And that one characteristic is it's all about their team.
Hmm.
And, we win as a team, as I said, we lose as a team. But it's not about me, right?
Hmm.
And someone says, if you have to have a particularly terrific quarter, oh my gosh, you did such a great job. That's, well, no, it's
Hmm.
it's these people, right? I mean, and even and today, I one of the things that I always say is that I try to hire really, really good people and just hold on, right?
Mhm.
Just let them go and let them do what caused me to have to make the decision to hire them. And I'm going to try to sort of guide us right from a vision perspective, but once we do that, then they're going and they're going to be so much happier, and they're going to take you to places that you never thought you would go.
Mhm.
And that's sort of what's happened with us, here in the last 6 or 8 months. And this journey that I've been on with these people has been terrific.
It's exciting. It's such an exciting time. In the industry overall, and this could be related to the respiratory care space or generally, what are you most excited about? Trends in healthcare, life sciences. What are some of the things that you're following closely?
I mean, a lot of it has to do really with electronic medical records, with data collection, with wireless. I mean, there's so many things that can be knowledge that can be gained from that kind of technology. And I think it's one of those areas where the more we progress, the better it's going to be for the patient, the easier it's going to be for the patient, the faster we can treat, and we can get to an endpoint.
Mhm. Excellent. Yeah, I'm more excited about the future than I am about where we've been, and we've seen some pretty amazing innovation, but
Yes, we have.
it's definitely only getting better. What as a leader? Okay, you've been in leadership for many years. You keep a pretty regimented. Of course, this year has been unusual, but travel and demands and so forth. Is there anything that you do to keep your balance, or do you have any favorite parts of your daily routine? Anything that's part of your life that's important?
Absolutely. I mean, certainly my family is the most important thing in my life, and you have to keep that. I know it's a cliche, but that work life balance is really important. I mean, for me, I like to keep certain hobbies, things that I really love doing, and things that I would love to be love to be doing right this minute.
Hmm.
In many cases, I mean, I'd love to be fishing out on my boat, or playing a little golf or doing something. But I do think everyone has to have an outlet. I think
Hmm.
people that work 20 hours a day, it's incredibly unhealthy.
Hmm.
The other thing I like to do is physical fitness. I mean, I usually get up, and I know some people are going, oh my gosh, really? I get up at 5 in the morning. I'm at the gym at 5:30. That's about 4 times a week, and after those decades take the toll on you, I think there is something to be said about for trying to stay young by making sure that you take care of your body,
Hmm. For
and
sure.
that's
Hmm.
a big one for me.
Yeah.
It really helps my mind. It helps me stay alert. It helps me have motivation and energy, because if I can tell if I don't work out for 2 or 3 weeks, then I'm going like, oh,
Hmm.
give me another 12 cups of coffee, kind of thing.
Hmm.
But I find if I work out, I take care of myself, then I certainly have more energy to put into my job, energy to put into my family, energy to put into my spiritual life. There's all kinds of things that I can do.
Yeah, definitely. You have to have that attention. You have to remember that you have to take care of you in order to take care of everyone else, your family, your
Absolutely.
team, your company, everything.
Yes.
So, last thoughts for anyone aspiring to a career similar to yours. What advice would you give the younger version of yourself or others that are earlier in career and thinking about where they want to go?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to know. It's hard to know exactly what the right decision is. I mean, for example, I take myself back to that time when I left the clinic, and I'm very, very happy that I made that decision. Although I could have had just as fulfilling a career to stay there. But I do think you have to follow your instincts
Mhm.
and figure out really what is it that motivates you, what makes you happy.
Mhm.
And for me, it's getting out, meeting people, it's helping people, it's doing a job to the best of my ability, and to being able to support my family.
Mhm.
And there's other things that motivate people that might be higher on the list. And so I think, make your list, figure out what motivates you, what you love to do,
Hmm.
and follow that path.
Yes, yes, there's nothing wrong with thinking about your fiscal goals too.
Mhm.
We have this mantra in society: oh, you do what you love and everything else. But at the end of the day, we what you love may need a certain amount of monetary income, right? I have this conversation with my kids sometimes. It says, I want to do these things. And I said, okay, well, let's talk about what you want to do outside of the daily work. What do you want to be able to afford to do? What kind of life do you want to have? Because sometimes they're not always the same and you have to dial it in, right? And even coming from the clinic into industry, I'm sure that there were some differences in compensation opportunities, and that didn't necessarily mean you're going to drive fancier cars. It meant you were able to live a different, more robust life in some ways, right? That was things that you can think about. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong for anyone in particular,
Exactly.
but there's nothing wrong with taking into account what you want to do from both a logical and emotional perspective.
Absolutely. No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, when I was working in the hospital, I mean, you make certain amount of money an hour, and that some places might give you a bonus, and you're pretty much that's just sort of where you are. I
Hmm.
mean, for me, one of the things that was fulfilling is when I did get out of the hospital and I started in that business. And again, it may have not be. I've met people who it was not really the right path for them.
Hmm.
I mean, being treating patients in the hospital was the better way for their particular skill set, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But for me, I wanted to get out. I wanted to work hard. I wanted to meet people. I learned how to sell. I mean, I learned how to create value. I learned how to understand what people's problems were. And so it did give you an opportunity to make that sale and make that commission, right?
Hmm.
And to be able to work as hard as you wanted to and really make more money than you've ever made in your entire life, right?
Hmm.
And so I do think once you've tasted that,
Hmm.
there are some people that it really is motivating, right, to
Sure.
be able to do that. And
Hmm.
but and I think you're right. I think reaching physical goals is certainly incredibly important, and and that obviously allows you to take care of your family and to give your family the the things that really are a help for a healthy life, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it's certainly part of everyone's job decision. As I
Sure.
said,
Hmm.
when he first said, "Well, do you want to come to work for me doing this?" I said, "Well, how much does it pay?" Right?
Sure.
That's
Sure.
that's that was the first question,
Yeah.
and and the answer to that was it didn't pay as much as I was making at the hospital. But if I sold a certain amount, then
Hmm.
obviously I could make more,
You
right?
saw the
So I
opportunity.
did have control over my destiny, and I
Hmm.
think that's one of the things that I really liked about that part of my career.
No, it makes a lot of sense. That control piece is huge, when you can really make an impact of it. And
Exactly.
with that, but that control is what I look to offer our audience
Mhm.
from these discussions. So this is
Sure.
incredibly helpful because there's so much about a career path, stemming from early education into early college years, even and beyond, that young adulthood where it's almost there's no real control given. It's like go out and hope for a job and go out and hope for this and hope for a mentor. And we do have a lot more at our fingertips that we can tap into. And if you think about where your passions are and what your goals are and really craft out that plan, it can benefit you. So thank you, Bud. We could have gone on all day. Next time is over a glass of wine or a beer or something. I know we've been trying to get in the same town for months now. We'll see. The lights at
Exactly.
the end of the tunnel. Maybe that'll happen soon.
Yes.
Thanks
I'm
for
sure it will. I mean, as we all are able to get out, and I mean, I've been in the last I don't know, this last 4 or 5 days. It's been amazing to be able to go to different places and not to have a mask on.
yes.
And
Yes.
uh, and I but I was certainly one of the early people to be vaccinated, and I that's been terrific to be
Mhm.
able to watch people as they go through and do the happy dance when they're vaccinated.
Yes, yes,
But
it's a freeing
being
feeling.
able to get out and travel and do
Hmm.
things and go to restaurants and so on. And I know that our trade shows are going to open up and we're all going to be back in front of customers very soon.
Yes, yes, it's happening. It's happening. Well, thank you again for joining us, Bud. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Holly, and I appreciate you asking me. I really do. Thank you
Yeah,
for having me.
it's been great. And thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the Power Curve. We'll see you next time.